Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with Ostrander and Grant Turner. We are weighing in, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. We have switched to a new recording platform, so we're getting our backdrops and everything worked out, so I apologize for any technical difficulties. Marco, you are back from Arizona. You look tan. How many birdies?
0.
How many bogeys?
0.
You didn't play.
Didn't play.
Okay. It's like, there's no way you made pars and doubles the whole time. I know that. So
who's talking about doubles?
I said pars or doubles. Those would have been your two choices. So, hey, your son got a shout out on Matt Chat. I interviewed Storniolo. Storniolo swears he's a better golfer than Ben, but I guess we're going to find out in about 6 weeks, right?
Yep.
So, shout out to Ben Ostrander. He's tying the knot in Chicago.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Big day.
GT, if you guys could stop doing great things at Grandview for like a week, it'd be great. I saw your 2017 team is being inducted into the Glenn Brand Iowa Hall of Fame. I want to make sure I say everything right. Tell me what it is so I make sure I get it right.
Yeah, it's at the Dan Gable Wrestling Museum in Cedar or Waterloo.
Okay.
So basically, it is a it's not like whatever the one in Stillwater or anything like that. It's basically commemorating the 2017 NAI National Championship team. They had set basically the point scoring record, and we had 12 All-Americans all in the top 5. So there was a lot of cool things with that team, but it is also an extremely great class getting inducted at the same time. I believe Joe Colon, Jay Borchell, some other amazing people. I'm sure I'm missing like probably 6 of them, but
is Morningstar going in that class, or is that something different?
Morningstar went into the Iowa High School Athletic Association Hall of Fame this past February.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I do remember that team because that's the first time I interviewed Nick Mitchell, because I believe that team outscored the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place teams combined.
Yep.
Yeah, so kind of a big deal. Anyway, we can't get Nick back on. We just had him on, but tell him congrats. So, and congrats to you as well. So,
thanks, brother.
Anyway, this is probably the lightest week we've ever had for weighing in terms of new subjects to talk about. I think we're going to get into who's returning. Flo did a great article on that. But let's start with this RTC thing. So there's a proposal that's been put out. I have a screenshot here, which I'm going to read, but it was put out by the MAC and the SoCon. And I'm going to read what it says here because I just don't want to misquote anything because there's a lot of people really on all sides of this. So GT is going to make fun of me because of my font size, but we're just going to move on and be better people. So source, Mid-American and Southern Conference, effective date August 1, 22. Proposal category amendment, topical area recruiting. Rationale: in recent years, Division I wrestling coaches have seen the focus of USA Wrestling regional training centers shift from the development of enrolled students for national and international competitions to the recruitment of prospective student athletes. The letters PSA are very important in this whole conversation. Institutions hosting USA Wrestling regional training centers are provided additional access to prospective student athletes in a difficult to regulate environment. This proposal would negate the recruiting advantage currently held by institutions hosting regional training centers, lessen monitoring burdens on the host institution's compliance staff, and allow institutional staff members involved with RTCs to focus their attention on the development of current student athletes. Then the next entry is Division I commitment addressed by proposal, the commitment to integrity and sportsmanship. Next one, is the proposal consequential or nationally significant? Yes, this proposal is nationally significant as it has substantial impact on all institutions that sponsor wrestling. Is the proposal enforceable, and do the merits outweigh monitoring burdens? Yes, this is all according to the people saying this. This proposal would lessen the monitoring burdens on institutions as PSAs would no longer be permitted to participate in RTCs. How does the proposal support student athlete success / well-being? This proposal would strengthen student athlete success as it would allow institutional staff members involved with RTCs to focus their attention on current student athletes. Estimated budget impact, none. Impact on student athletes' time, academically or athletically, none. So this is a big suitcase to unpack. And I want to try to do it as fairly as possible. People should know, I think everybody can tell that Mark and Grant and I are actually friends. And even if we didn't have a podcast, we would talk maybe not as often, but pretty regularly about wrestling. When this came out, we all circulated the information so we could be as well read on as possible. I talked to some people that are pretty high up in the sport. Obviously promised to keep their name out of this, but basically this was proposed by the MAC and the SoCon. This will have a huge impact negatively on women's wrestling, is what these people have told me, is that, right now, I think that the argument, let me start with the argument that I understand, just to lay this out and let you guys weigh in. I don't mean to talk so much, but just kind of lay it out. The argument that's presented by the MAC and the SoCon are, I believe it's really a haves and have-not argument, that the haves, because they have these RTCs, because they have funding, now can talk to high school kids. Because if you're a Fargo All-American, you're a state champion, if you've done so much according to the criteria, you can now train with the colleges. The more you're at that college, the more likely you are to be recruited by them and want to go there. And it's harder for schools that don't have RTCs to recruit them. I think that's in a nutshell. I don't want to say that's in a nutshell because I'm not the one presenting the argument. I think the argument for the current system, and no system is perfect, but we are seeing, and Grant, you could probably attest to this better than Mark or I, we are seeing massive developmental jumps in kids coming out earlier and earlier, younger and younger, being better and better. On the girls' side, you look at like the Welkers, the Blades of the world. These young ladies are, I think Kennedy Blades was our Olympic alternate, and she was in high school. We have Gable Stevenson still has a year of college eligibility left and just won an Olympic gold medal. And this is because they get to work out with senior athletes, and that the high school kids, by being able to work out with college and senior level athletes, are getting better faster. USA Wrestling's official stance is, and I'm looking over because I have my notes, they're asking that the vote to be tabled, to not vote on it. The vote is scheduled for the second weekend of April. I will say this is not the opinion of USA Wrestling. This is not the opinion of Mark Ostrander. This is not the opinion of Grant Turner, what I'm about to say next. It's only David Mirikitani. People are going to always coach to the rules. So if you take away RTCs and create clubs, people are going to always figure it out. And when people are good at raising money, and the goal of the money is to help the colleges win, they're going to figure out a way to, within the rules, help the college win. GT, you're involved with one of the main reasons, there's two main reasons you're on this podcast. One is you're a fun guy to talk to, and two, a truckload really from April to October, especially. I think Mark and I would agree you're the expert on this show. We're kind of quarterbacking it for you. So when you heard about this, when you're reading about this, I'm sure you get hit up, your phone blows up every day about all sorts of things. What is your initial reactions, thoughts to all this?
Well, I think the best thing I could probably start off with a statement is that I believe that the RTC model is helping wrestling across the board for both USA Wrestling, collegiate wrestling, high school wrestling, and women's wrestling. So I do believe that the RTCs are a benefit to the US. As it pertains to maybe like the MAC and SoCon conversation where like it's the haves and have-nots, that's college wrestling, that's college athletics. I don't think that there's anything super crazy about the haves and have-nots of collegiate athletics based off of alumni, student population, and donor give back. I don't think it just is a wrestling problem or a wrestling issue. I think that when you have the University of Michigan having however many alumni that graduate from the University of Michigan in all aspects, you got a lot more donors than maybe, let's say, Ohio University has every year.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Ohio University. I'm just using them as an example as a very good program within the MAC.
Yeah.
So on the USA Wrestling side, of course, once again, we all don't speak for USA Wrestling. We're not a mouthpiece for them. We can just use our own opinions to basically say what we're going to say. Is I just think that for women's wrestling and access to the coaches, because there is only so many, was there 78 Division I programs for men?
It's in the 70s for sure.
Having access to the better minds of wrestling, not to say that the Division II, Division III, NAI, and JUCO coaches are not some of the best minds in wrestling, but you have access to those strategic locations at the Division I level with really, really good coaching staffs. And if they have RTCs that would then develop people within that area, that will help. And once again, not every kid that grows up in the state of Pennsylvania is going to Penn State. Not everybody that grows up in the state of Ohio and goes to the Ohio RTC are automatically funneled into their collegiate program. It's not how that works. So I really don't see, now maybe the best kid might go there, but if you're raising the abilities of everybody within that RTC to be at a very high level, once again, I think that's the ticket for the kids that then they can choose where they want to go. So that's, I would say, my first initial stance, and then open it up for discussion with Mark and, basically get, what you guys think of everything.
For sure. Marco.
I agree 100% with Grant. This is not going to solve the problem. The haves and have-nots have been around forever, and I don't ever see it changing. You still have an opportunity to wrestle Division I. You still have an opportunity to qualify for the NCAAs. And we've all seen it, guys. We've seen the Cinderella stories in so many sports. Guys come in, the 16, 15 seed, and they've made it to the finals of the national tournament. They have the ability to do it. They may not have all the resources some of these other schools have, but you can still do it. So I think it's going to be bad for wrestling. It's going to be bad for international, for the United States, if they pass this, because you got to have training partners, and you can't just go out and spend $200,000 every month to bring in people to work out with. Most clubs don't have that kind of money, or most, RTCs. So, it's just going to hurt our sport. Now, I understand the good schools are getting the best kids, the cream of the crop, and that happens in every sport, and it's going to continue to happen. So I don't know what the solution is, but this isn't it.
Yeah, again, I wrote some notes as you guys were talking. We try not to talk about this stuff too much because I like our reactions to actually be organic, hey, what do you think about this? And we're all of different ages, but we all respect and we all learn from each other. So a couple of things. Number one is on the freestyle side of things, if you combine the men and women, America won the Olympics. America does not win the Olympics without the RTC structure. So I think that's an important note. The second thing, I think all of us are all sports fans at various levels. Grant is actually paid to be a sports fan of different sports for a living. But St. Peter's just made the Elite Eight in basketball. They have, I think, 3,000 student enrollment. So it can be done. You can capture lightning in a bottle. You can argue basketball is a make or miss game, but it can happen. And they have 4 guards, and they figure out a way to get, to the best final 8 teams in the country. Mark, you made a great point. And I think you piggybacked on what GT said, which is as things get better, even the people below, they benefit from that. Like I remember when we were at Merrimack, as Missouri got better, it helped us because Missouri for a while was giving scholarships to kids who were like one-time state champs or a couple-time runner-ups. And then as they were getting the Ben Askrens of the world, the Keegan O'Toole's of the world, those kind of kids, the requirement to get money at Mizzou went up. You know, the same kids who were getting money are now going to walk on. And if they can't afford to walk on, that helps. And I would venture to say that helps the NAI schools. That helps the Grandviews. Like Iowa and Iowa State being good at wrestling helps Grandview. People may not see that, but that helps Grandview because now a kid who's maybe a 1 or 2 time small school state champ that doesn't do anything in the summer, those schools are getting on paper better recruiting options than that guy or girl. And so now Grandview becomes a more attractive option for them. And I'm not saying Grant saying that, I'm saying I say that. That's how it worked for us in community college. Mark, you were at Iowa Central. The better Iowa and Iowa State were, the more kids would maybe go, well, if I can go to Iowa Central, I can establish in-state residence. And now I have 2-3 schools, Iowa, ISU, UNI. One other thing, Mark, which you absolutely said and I agree on, is iron. I wrote it down. You didn't say it in these words, but iron sharpens iron, right? And we were all, I'd say, I won't put myself, you guys were great coaches. I'd like to think my dad were pretty good coaches. I think we'd all agree if you put a bunch of hammers in the room and if you just blew the whistle, that's better than having the best coach in the world with no training partners. Because wrestling is, you got to have somebody to scrap with. Like, Mark, you're the oldest one here, and I mean that, out of respect. If you teach me a move and I have somebody as good as Grant Turner to work on with it, I'm going to get better than if I have nobody to work on with it. But if I don't have a great coach like you, but I have 7 Grant Turners in the room, I'm going to figure it out. Like that eventually will happen. I'm like, why do you keep kicking my butt, Grant? Like, what are you doing? And we stay after practice and we figure it out. Obviously, the best of both worlds is to have a Mark Ostrander coaching me and a truckload of Grant Turners and like say I'm at Grandview, the Grant Hendersons and the Paul Reedys and all these other guys to work out with. That's how you see people make gains. The last thing I'll say is, Mark, you mentioned the haves and have-nots, and that's true. It'll always be that way. But you see new schools becoming haves. Penn State was not a have 15 years ago.
No.
It was,
they were good. They've always been fairly good, but they were never what they are now.
I would say fairly good is a much better word than good.
All right. Well,
both of them. Yeah.
I think as college wrestling develops parity has been around forever, right? I mean, Bobby Douglas goes to Arizona State and all of a sudden builds a dynasty at Arizona State and, wins a national title, in the 80s. So like you have all of these different halves in Edinburgh getting a trophy in the top 3, top 4, back when Tim Flynn was there and, Port and all those guys were a part of that team.
And those guys, yeah.
Yeah. Once again, Central Michigan was up there for a while during, kind of the early 2000s with all of those guys. There's ebbs and flows to teams. And right now, I think probably, and you guys would probably agree, I mean, the Big Ten is pretty dominant right now. But also back in different time periods, the Big 12 was extremely dominant.
Yep.
The ACC has basically become, in my opinion, a very, very good power conference with, Virginia Tech, UVA, NC State, UNC. Like UNC's now put 2 guys in the finals in the past 2 years. Virginia Tech had their first ever national champion in Mekhi Lewis. So I think as parity is expanding to more programs, you'll get more and more people invested into the sport. And I think also with the rise of women's wrestling, you now have a whole new fan base and whole new structure of fans and people that would help your RTCs and clubs and universities become fans now. I mean, women's wrestling was in the Olympics in 2004. And I mean, basically everybody, I believe, was just, either going to the Olympic Training Center or training in a garage, or at your local college or whatever it may be. There was no structure behind that drive and that amount of emphasis into that sport category. So with all of these things diversifying and having parity, even within women's wrestling, there's a lot more parity within the college structure. And I think that's good for wrestling as well.
And I got one, David, I got one other thing I want to say.
Of course.
Youth wrestling right now is phenomenal. And there's not just one or two good kids out there, David. There's 20 good kids at each weight class that are talented enough to wrestle Division I. There's plenty to pick from. And the reason it's like that is because what USA Wrestling, what the RTCs have done, how our teams have performed at the Worlds and the Olympics in the past 12, 15 years. I mean, people want to be part of the sport now. So we're getting very talented people. We got clubs started, especially in Iowa. You can see a huge difference since some of these clubs have been developed. The way these kids wrestle, it's a completely different style. They're aggressive. It's nonstop chain wrestling, which, in the past, I'm not sure I would have won a match in high school. Now that I watch these kids now, the way they wrestle now. So
you would have adapted.
Maybe, but I mean, I don't know. I'm old. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is
I don't think you'd win a lot of matches now. I think if you were that same age, you'd have figured it out. Winners win. Guys figure it out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have that shirt. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that there's enough good kids out there for every school to have talent. And that's what I think Grant was getting at with this parity with Virginia Tech and all these schools. I mean, they voted the best dual last year. I think Internet did an article, and I was reading some of it, that the best dual last year consensus was Iowa, North Carolina State. Not Iowa, Penn State, Iowa, North Carolina State. For what happened during the duel, how close the matches were with, guys like Ironman and, those guys. So, I mean, you can do this. There's plenty of good kids out there to go recruit.
I'll put a bow on it by one personal thing and a couple of observations. The observations first. You can be good. You don't have to be in a great high school wrestling state. Arizona State University has won back-to-back team trophies. And I know those Arizona high schools are doing a good job, but they're not Pennsylvania. They're not Ohio. They're not California in terms of how many All-Americans and the geography. They don't have as many kids and they're spread out more. RTCs are great because it's like we're all going to meet in the middle. Like when we did our podcast, the live podcast in Iowa City, like we don't all see each other in the same place, maybe 2-3 times a year at the most. The women's wrestling thing, GT, is a really good point about, like you mentioned, people were like literally working out in garages or basements, or even like the local college thing actually hit home because a lot of local colleges don't do a lot of spring and summer training. I think that's one of the advantages Grandview has. You guys wrestle all year round. You get better all year round. You're going to age level national tournaments. You've got a Ben Provisor, you've got an Allie Reagan on staff, those kind of things. But if you're a girl or a woman, depending on how old you are, and you wrestle only freestyle and you train with college guys that are training folk style, literally have different testosterone and bone density levels. And then when their season is over, they don't really want to do freestyle. A lot of schools don't do that. These RTCs are critical to the success of female wrestling, and female wrestling is critical to the success of wrestling. If you are even the oldest and most misogynistic and most stereotypical person, you should still want women's wrestling because it keeps men's wrestling off the chopping block. Because that was the equivalent. Like, well, they're not going to cut baseball. They got softball. They're not going to cut basketball. They got girls basketball, in high school. Well, now there is wrestling, more and more. I mean, like Iowa just sanctioned it. Missouri, the only time Missouri's been ahead of Iowa on everything in wrestling, had already sanctioned it. Border Brawl, we had 9 girls matches. It was, that's, GT, you were there. I think that was the kind of the highlight of the night. Like how many great young ladies were wrestling that event, how high skill level those matches were. You and me had moms and dads of these girls saying, thank you. People don't do this enough for us. We got to be sort of the stars of the show. I mean, I had one girl say, I got to be on the same team as Matthew Kolodzik. Another one, I was on the same team as Dean Heil. That's awesome. absolutely awesome, and it needs to continue to grow. So the other thing, I got to figure out how to share a screen on here, present now. Let's see. Okay, so we're switching over to the Bill Farrell. Okay, so Bill Farrell is this weekend. GT, this is up at UNI in the Dome, correct?
Yep.
And this is the one that was in New York City at the New York Athletic Club, right?
Yeah. So I believe I think this is going to be primarily a USA and Canada event. I don't think there's going to be much international competition coming in.
Right.
Because I don't know if it was sanctioned through the UWW or not. But yes, this is the Bill Farrell that would normally have been at the New York Athletic Club in their gym. They're just moving it to postseason nationals in the same facility as, the other USA wrestling event.
We got our guy, Alec Pantaleo there, who did a great job at the event on Wednesday night at Nationals. He didn't miss chest or arm day. So we'll just touch on this. 57 is pretty light. I think the two names people know there are Zane Richards and then Greg Diakomahalis. 61 is, it's interesting. You got DeShazer, you got Gross, you got Shelton Mack, you got Graf. GT, we'll lean on you. Is Gross the favorite or is Graf the favorite? Like, who will be the one seed, and like who would, if people were to put $10 on this, who would be the betting favorite?
There's a couple of, Townsell was an U23 world team member, and DeShazer, I believe, is in the same category as that. I would probably put Graf as the one, Gross as the two, just because Graf's actually made a senior world team. But once again, that will go into the seeding meeting. So,
yep.
So I'd say Graf once, Gross 2, DeShazer 3, probably Townsell 4. But
Shelton Mack made our Pan Am team a couple years ago, right?
Yeah. And once again, I was going to caveat that with 4, 5, and 6. Just depends on who's in the seeding meeting and where they want to wind up at.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't sleep on Shelton Mack.
For sure, right? Yeah. Okay, 65, Kolodzik and Heil. I like the fact that the top two seeds just wrestled at Michigan Border Brawl, so selfishly that. 70 is interesting. Brock Mahler, Ashnault, Tyler Berger, Pantaleo. I'm just scrolling to make sure. So Pantaleo is the one here, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
So Mark, it'd be interesting to see like an Ashnault Brock Mahler match, right?
Oh yeah, but Tyler Berger's really, really good. To me, he's probably the second best guy in this weight bracket. Would you agree with that, Grant?
Yeah, and Berger's got a new home. He's part of the California Regional Training Center with Stanford. So he's now out there with Grant Leith, Vincenzo, Enoch Francois, and Rob Cole. But I think that this one has a lot more parity to it than people may think. There's some good collegiate names here, but once again, we're in a freestyle world here. So some of these guys are a little bit maybe better with carrying the torch in freestyle. Because I know there was a kid, JUCO kid that was on that list. DeAndre Wilson beat Dan Valamont at the trials in Texas before. And he's no slouch. And then of course, a couple, the other guys that you would, primarily think of is, like the Ashnaults and Bergers and the guys that actually carry a little bit more of name recognition, I would say.
Yeah. That's the phrase I was saying, name brand recognition. Yeah. So 74, the name brand guys are Josh Shields, Purinton, LaValle. That's a pretty, and Quentin Perez wrestled, I think, at Campbell. I think that's right. I remember us ranking him like he was always like in the 20s. It felt like maybe snuck up to like the high teens the year we were ranking him, or years.
Yeah.
Dylan Williams is a senior world team member for Canada. He wrestled at the Oslo World Championships, I believe, at 74 kilos. So I think, that's a, bona fide, top 3 guy in Canada.
Mark, this is why we got Grant on the pod for stuff like that. Literally.
Yeah. Well, I knew that, David.
You did know that. Okay.
I think I remember. I think I watched that meet. Yeah.
2 out of 3 Dennis. Yeah. Okay. 79, Tommy Gant, Chance Marsteller. Isaiah White pops up. Manny Rojas, who is a senior in high school, going to Iowa State from Nick Simmons' school. There's some fun names there, right, GT? And Devin Skatska is a guy that was at Minnesota that now looks like he's training somewhere in Michigan and out of Spartan Combat.
Yep. I mean, Tommy Gant, Skatska, Marsteller. Marsteller was just in the finals against JB over in Yasterdo. Crazy. You got a high school dude in there, Isaiah White. I haven't seen his name pop up in a while, so very excited to see what he brings to the table. And then, Liddy from Indiana. That'll be another guy in there. And then I got to toot my horn for Casey Randall's NAI National Champ 174. Viking
there
Wrestling
you go, Viking Wrestling Club. There you go.
Gotta throw a little bit of flowers at him. So super excited about this weight.
What's the opposite of shade?
Yeah, exactly.
Shine.
Give a little shine to him.
Zay is good in freestyle too, guys. Like that's really his best style. So keep an eye out. Okay, 86. I think the names. I mean, there's Miles Martin, Nick Reenan, Owen Webster. I think those are the three big names. I feel like Martin's the one, Reenan's probably the two. It'll be interesting to see. That's a kind of an interesting match because Reenan's a go forward, be real physical, and Miles Martin great on angles and kind of great at using your momentum against you. So, Marco, if you had to pick a winner here, is it Miles Martin or would you go Reenan or somebody else?
I'd probably go Miles. I think he has most experience.
So 92 right now, Scotty Boykin's winning by default. So we'll switch out of that. 97. Joe Rao is probably the biggest name. It's interesting if he's going freestyle. You're going to see a lot of head pinches. And then heavyweight's actually pretty good. You got Dom, Zilmer, Francisco, and Derek White. A lot of high quality beef there, right, GT?
All those guys are monsters, just absolute monsters.
Yeah.
I know Derek White is. I watched him out in Detroit. I never seen a bigger man in my life.
You go stand next to Saran Francisco.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Saran is, he's like NFL linebacker big. Like if I was as big as him, I would be Ray Lewis, just flat out. Like he is a ginormous human being.
For sure.
Can he wrestle?
He can wrestle.
He's a really good wrestler. He's bounced around a little bit. Super excited for that weight. Dom's also a beast. Hayden Zilmer is like the great hope of all little guys that get big.
Yeah. Zilmer was like, that's that whole story. Like him and Dom were like in the same bracket in high school. One was at heavyweight and one was like at 100 pounds, give or take. All right, let's go to the ladies. Emily Shilson, and then how do we pronounce this lady from Grandview?
Arelis Baez.
Yeah, you could have given me 9 chances. I wouldn't have got that right. Arelis Baez. Okay. So Shilson's obviously a pretty heavy favorite here. 53. It looks like it's just Rana and Mortimer. 55.
Alicia is good, or she's at 55. Yeah.
Just 2 names at 55 too. We know Alicia. She's actually a Kansas City girl, I think, originally. 57. Just not a ton of entries on the ladies' side here, but obviously good quality. But 3 at 57, 4 at 59, 62's got 3 or 4, 65 has 2, 68 has 1. So hopefully some more people will enter. Greco, 3 at 55. Max Nowry is the favorite there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Duffield is good too. Don't sleep on that guy. But Nowry's the world team member, so once again, he deserves his, first seed.
Yep. Peter Hammer is a great name. I don't know if he can throw, but that's an awesome name. Dalton Robert. Ildar is the big favorite here at 60, right?
So at 60, it'll be Ildar, Randon Miranda, Dalton Roberts. So Ildar will be the 1 seed. Randon and Dalton will be 2, 3. Once again, all those guys have been age category guys. 2 of them have been world team members at the senior level. So.
Okay. 63's got a lot of people, like, even I think if you don't follow Greco a ton, like Jesse Thilke, Sam Jones, Aiden Nutter, Sandoval's the kid out of Maryland that pins everybody in folk style. So we should see some high flying action here, right?
Yeah, this is a grip it and rip it group.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. 67, Hayden Tuma is the name that pops out to me. Lenny Merkin as well. And Sancho. Oh, I keep scrolling. Yeah, that's a great weight, right?
Oh, Germanaro is also a beast at that weight class. But yeah, Letty, Alex Sancho. This will be a good one. This will be a good one to watch.
Okay, so 72, former world team member Patrick Smith is I always tell the story. Jason Bryant was kind enough to send me the name pronunciation guide the year I did the Worlds in 2019. And, he had all these like phonetic explanations. And then it was almost like Grant Turner or Pat Smith. He's like, in the pronunciation guide, he just put duh. So, shout out to JB for being JB. 77, I guess. Jesse Porter, right? We didn't qualify the weight, but he would have been our Olympic team member, correct?
Yep, Olympic trials champion.
Yeah, Olympic trials champion. There you go. That was the match I had where the guys didn't know who was winning. Jesse Porter, Rayvon Perkins. Rayvon's a super high upside guy. Alec Ortiz, been around forever on the scene. Kamal Bey is back, GT.
The return of Kamal Bey.
Let's go. I'm here for all of that. I love Kamal. So, great kid, wrestled in our event. Oak Park River Forest guy. 82, Ben P. Are you cornering him this weekend?
Me and Milan.
There you go. Good for you, man. So will he be the 1 seed here?
Yep, he'll be the 1. Spencer Woods will be the 2. Probably Epps will be 3.
You're seeing everybody there. There's nobody else below.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. 87. Pretty thin in terms of number. Alan Vera is going to be the 1, right?
Alan Vera will be 1, and then probably either Delaney or Kodiak Stevens. Kodiak Stevens, I believe, is an age group category medalist, either for Pan Ams or Worlds. I can't remember right off the top of my head.
Okay. Nick Boykin, probably the most recognizable name at 97. And then Tanner Farmer is probably the most recognizable name at heavyweight. So to make sure that people understand this, so this is where it gets a little complicated if you don't follow along. The goal of all this is to make the world team, okay? There are 15 of the 30 weights. There's 10 Greco weights, 10 freestyle weights, 10 women's weight. 15 of those, I talked to Gary Abbott, there's already people in Final X. That's the equivalent of like Thomas, on the men's freestyle side, Thomas Gilman, Dayton Fix, all those people. The U.S. Open gets you into the world team trials. The winner of the Bill Farrell gets you into the world team trials. Then the world team trials are actually, those are in Iowa, right? GT in May, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then the winner of the trials in the weight where the 15 are established, then goes to Final X. Like the winner at 57 kilos of the trials will wrestle Gilman at a weight like 65 kilos, which we have a lot of good guys, and I'm just using this because it's the most recognizable, men's freestyle. What they'll do there is, since there's nobody waiting, they'll wrestle to the finals and then they stop wrestling. And that final match goes to Final X New York or Final X Stillwater, depending on the weight class. Am I explaining this correctly, GT?
Yep.
All right. 1 out of 10. I get it right. So I don't think we have time to get into this, but we may next week. I think we probably will. Flo did a great article on who's coming back, who has eligibility and who doesn't. And Mark, you and me did the rankings for a long time. And the first thing we would do, like the week after nationals, is I would go through the bracket. I'd scratch out all the seniors. we'd rank them. Obviously 1 through 8 is pretty simple. The round of 12, I think the criteria we used just to keep it consistent, even if we didn't agree with the seeding, was those guys that were the seeded the highest in order. Like if GT was the 9 seed, you were the 10, and I was the 11, those guys would get ranked in that order. Same thing in the round of 16, same thing in the round of 34, same thing in the round of 32. We wouldn't plug in red shirts. We wouldn't plug in guys moving up or down. That was just our initial framework so that we had that established like literally by April 1, which is probably when this podcast will come out. That gets more and more complicated when you can't figure out who's a senior, right?
Yep.
But they've done a good job over there. I think it was Kozak wrote the article. So that'll be something that we can hit on next week. We'll go through Bill Farrell results. And GT Vegas is the next, after Bill Farrell, Vegas is the next big one at the national level, right?
Yep, that'll be a really big one. End of April 27th, 28th, 29th, I believe, at the South Point in Las Vegas. It'll be a really huge event. That'll be also age group category, so like U20s or UW juniors will be there as well.
Yeah, I saw some things on Twitter. There's some people that are a little upset because it's the same weekend as the NFL draft.
Yep, the draft is happening in Vegas as well.
That's in Vegas also, and hotels are going for like $300 a night.
All right, so I'm glad you said that. So first of all, to go back to GT's point, not only there's several age group tournaments, there's like Western regionals out there too. And kids, like if you've never been there, like I told my parents they need to come out. It's in the South Point, but like GT, it's literally in 3 different places. One, like 2 completely different things. And then the tournament has like an upper and lower level to it. Like I'm walking around like waving in my hands like I'm like there's
an arena and then there's a ballroom. So it's very well set up. Arena, top level, ballroom, all kind of on the same playing field. But like, yes, if you, let's say, wind up on the backside, you're up in another area. And then all the front side matches are down in the arena. It's a really cool setup for a wrestling event. Tons of space, and the South Point has been a great host of that event for probably 5 to 6 years now.
Yeah. So, Mark, to your point, I'm sure USA Wrestling has an agreement with South Point for several years. I didn't ask Gary Abbott, but they can't help it that the NFL put their draft in Las Vegas. And this is why people should get their rooms early and get them ahead of time. So if people want to complain, the people that booked the room 6 months ago, like I did, there's nothing to complain about. Like, I understand that people can't always do things. Sometimes people have to wait till the last minute. But USA Wrestling puts this schedule out, especially like the US Open. It's not like Final X. The US Open is always in Vegas the last weekend of April. So I get that you're giving those people a voice, but I just think that can be worked around. There's Airbnbs. You figure it out. I remember, and it'll be cool that the draft is there that weekend. I mean, obviously Vegas always has a lot of stuff going on. I might find Grant Turner for a Moscow Mule at some point that week. That there's a statistical probability that could happen of greater than 50.1%. But I tell people, if you want to watch amazing wrestling, and maybe this year, to your point, Mark, the hotels are more expensive, but in a normal year, amazing wrestling for a cheaper ticket and great stuff to do at night, go to the US Open. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, 1 year, Ironman is wrestling the Wyoming kid, and his name's escaping me right now. GT, who made the finals? Or either one of you guys, who made the finals from Wyoming against Yanni? Meredith.
Bryce
Meredith. They're wrestling in the round of 16. And I said to Willie Saylor, I'm like, if these guys were wearing Wyoming and Mizzou singlets, 16,000 people would be talking about it. Instead, there's like 16 people sitting in front of Mat 7 watching it. So if you're a wrestling junkie, and I mean that as a compliment, if you're a wrestling nerd, this tournament's awesome. If you can't watch it in person, go online, but get the Grant Turner home setup with as many monitors that you can to watch it, or the Mark Ostrander with the Apple TV multiple screen setup. It's a great way to watch wrestling. It's also, and GT, you're as good at this as anybody. It's an awfully cool place to network and run into old friends and stuff like that. And it's an exhausting day, even if it was in like podunk, whatever, then you add this stuff that there's actually some things to do at night. It's a long run, but it's a good one. So anything else before we sign off, boys?
No.
All good.
Marco, I'm a little disappointed you didn't play golf, but the less you play, the better, the more strokes I can ask for when I see you in 6 weeks. So
No, it usually doesn't work that way, David.
that's how it works.
Well, we'll be on the same team, so we're competing against the other team. So
Okay.
if you want a little side bet, hey, come on, get some.
We need to get some weighing in golf shirts between now and then. Get some
I
USA.
want to get Grant on a golf course. I hear he can play.
I'm sure he can hit it
It's
300.
just rumors.
I don't know who you talk to, but there's probably about like maybe 4 people that saw me play in general last year.
Okay.
I would venture to say this: GT can hit it 300. The direction is probably TBD. So is that I feel like that could happen. So
All good. We're all good.
Grip it and rip it. All right. For everybody that's watching, listening, thank you guys for doing so. Thank you for sharing, and we will talk to you guys next week.